I never thought I'd be the guy writing one of these posts. You read them all the time. Some poor sucker finds out his wife's been cheating, his whole world falls apart, and suddenly he's left trying to pick up the pieces. You think, that could never be me? But here I am. My name's Jake. I'm 36, an auto mechanic, and I thought I had a pretty solid life. Married to Olivia for 9 years, supporting her while she climbed the corporate ladder at Covington Group. I was proud of her. She was smart, ambitious, the kind of woman who made things happen. We didn't have kids, but we had a good life. Or so I thought. Things started feeling off. I don't mean the little changes that happen in a marriage over time. I mean real shifts. Olivia started working later, always glued to her phone, but not in the way she used to be. Before, she'd send me texts during the day, little updates, check-ins. That stopped. When I'd ask about work, she'd give vague answers. I told myself it was stress. Her company was struggling and she was leading some big project that could make or break them. I figured she was just under a lot of pressure. But then one night I found something I couldn't ignore. Olivia had left her purse on the kitchen counter when she went to shower. I wasn't snooping, I was just grabbing a pen when I saw the pharmacy bag inside. I don't know why I looked. Maybe something in me already knew. But when I pulled out the receipt, my stomach dropped. A prescription for the morning after pill. I stood there staring at it, my hands shaking. We hadn't slept together in weeks. And even if we had, I had a vasectomy 3 years ago. I should have stormed into the bathroom, demanded answers. But I didn't. I just put everything back like I never saw it and walked out to the garage. I sat in my car for over an hour trying to process. There was no good explanation for this. None. That was the moment my marriage ended in my head. But I needed proof. Cold, undeniable proof. So I started watching. Not in a crazy, paranoid way, but I started paying attention to the things I had ignored. Who she was texting when she left for work, how she dressed. And then I made a plan. I wasn't going to be blindsided. I was going to catch her in the act. After finding that prescription, I knew I had to be smart. Olivia was the kind of woman who could talk her way out of anything. If I confronted her too soon, she'd have an excuse ready, maybe even turn it around on me, make me look crazy for doubting her. I wasn't going to give her that chance. So I waited. Gathered everything I could without tipping her off. I started checking her schedule more closely. She had always been busy, but now it was different. Late meetings, sudden business trips, canceled date nights. She'd come home wearing perfume that I knew she hadn't put on that morning. She was dressing sharper. Heels she never wore for just another day at the office. One night, she left her laptop open on the kitchen counter while she grabbed a drink. I took a chance and glanced at the screen. Just one email caught my eye. It was from someone named RS, the subject line just a simple, "Tonight?" My heart pounded, but I stayed calm. Olivia came back, grabbed her drink, and took the laptop upstairs. She didn't notice anything. That name though, RS. I didn't recognize it. And I knew most of the people she worked with. That's when I decided I needed more than just hunches. I went to an old buddy of mine, Chris. He's good with tech. Used to work security systems before switching to car diagnostics. I told him I needed help tracking Olivia's location without her knowing. He gave me a small GPS tracker that could stick under the bumper of her car. Tiny, undetectable. Connected to an app on my phone. The next morning, before Olivia left for work, I crawled under her car and placed it. My hands were shaking the whole time, but once I did it, I felt something I hadn't in days: control. That night I waited. I pretended to be normal, even kissed her goodbye as she left for a dinner meeting with clients. But the moment she pulled out of the driveway, I opened the app. She wasn't heading to any restaurant. She was going straight to the Crestwood Hotel, one of the most expensive in the city. My stomach turned. I sat there, gripping my phone, watching her little dot move on the screen. I wasn't going to just sit at home and let this happen. I grabbed my keys, got in my truck, and followed. I needed to see it for myself. I parked across the street from the Crestwood Hotel, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. Olivia's car was right there in the valet lane. I watched as she stepped out, her black dress hugging her curves in a way that wasn't meant for business. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't stressed. She was smiling. She pulled out her phone and sent a quick text. A minute later, a man stepped out from the hotel lobby. I recognized him instantly. Richard Stanton, CEO of Covington Group. Powerful, rich, married. The same guy Olivia had been mentioning in passing for months, talking about how much pressure he was under, how much was riding on this project. I had even met him once at a company event. He shook my hand, called me the man behind the strong woman. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted there to be some explanation. But when Olivia leaned in and kissed him, slow and intimate, I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. I didn't storm out of my truck. I didn't yell or cause a scene. I just sat there, frozen, watching as she took his arm and they walked inside like they had done this 100 times before. I don't remember driving home. I don't remember how long I sat in my garage, staring at nothing. All I know is that when Olivia finally walked through the front door hours later, I was calm. Too calm. She smiled like nothing had happened. Tossed her purse on the counter, stretched like she was exhausted from her meeting. "Hey babe," she said, walking over to kiss me. "You're up late?" I looked at her, my heart pounding, my stomach churning. And then, instead of asking her anything, instead of letting her see what I knew, I just said, "Yeah." Couldn't sleep. Because I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. After seeing Olivia with Richard Stanton, I wanted to rip her world apart. But I knew I had to be careful. If I confronted her too soon, she'd lie. If I blew up, she'd spin it like I was the problem. No, I needed her to feel safe, like she was getting away with it. That way when I hit her with the truth, it would destroy her. So I acted normal. Better than normal, even. The next morning I made her coffee like I always did. Kissed her on the forehead. Asked about her meeting. She didn't even blink. "Oh, it was long," she said, stretching. "Just a lot of back and forth. Richard's really putting pressure on everyone." I almost laughed. "Pressure? Yeah, I bet. Sounds rough," I said, pretending to be sympathetic. She sighed. "Yeah. It's been exhausting. But it'll be worth it in the end." That's when I knew. She didn't just see this as some fling. She was thinking long-term. Maybe she thought he'd leave his wife for her. Maybe she thought this affair would boost her career. She had no idea that I already had one foot out the door. For the next week, I kept gathering evidence. I checked her phone when she was in the shower. She had his number saved under Lisa from marketing. Cute. They texted constantly, but she was careful. No obvious messages, just vague ones like "see you later" and "can't wait." I checked our bank statements. She had been spending money at expensive restaurants I'd never been to, charging spa treatments and lingerie to her personal card. I even found a hotel charge under my name, as if I was the one staying there. The audacity. But the real confirmation came when I took a day off from the shop and followed her again. This time, she met Richard in broad daylight at a different hotel. Like they weren't even worried about being caught. I took pictures. Videos. I documented everything. And the whole time, Olivia came home to me like nothing was wrong. She kissed me. She slept in our bed. She called me babe. I almost told her that night. Almost threw it all in her face. But then I thought, no. She deserves worse. She deserved to believe she had won, right up until the moment I took it all away. By now, I had everything I needed, proof, time, and patience. But I wasn't just going to walk away quietly. Olivia needed to feel this. She needed to understand that she wasn't just betraying me, she was digging her own grave. So I started setting things up. First, I made copies of all the evidence. Screenshots of their messages, pictures of them at the hotels, credit card statements. I put everything on a USB drive and emailed a backup to myself under a new, anonymous account. I wasn't about to let her weasel her way out of this. Then I reached out to someone I never thought I'd have a reason to contact. Richard Stanton's wife. Her name was Evelyn, and from what little I knew, she was a quiet, elegant woman, probably used to turning a blind eye to her husband's business trips. But this was about to be shoved right in her face. I sent her an email with no introduction. Just the photos, the screenshots, and a simple message. "You deserve to know." I didn't expect a response. Not right away. But I knew that once she saw it, the fallout would be nuclear. The next piece of the plan involved Olivia's job. Covington Group was already struggling, and Olivia had been parading around like she was the company's savior. But what would happen if the board of directors found out she was sleeping with the married CEO while handling a major project? I printed out a little anonymous package and mailed it directly to their headquarters. No return address, no fingerprints. Just cold, hard facts. And finally, I set the stage for my exit. I got my finances in order, moved my direct deposits to a new account, quietly started shifting personal items out of the house. I even met with a divorce attorney to make sure Olivia wouldn't be able to screw me over when the dust settled. Because when I left, I wasn't leaving her with anything. She was going to lose everything at the same time. And she wouldn't even see it coming. It didn't take long for everything to start unraveling. Once the pieces were in motion, it was like watching a slow, inevitable car crash. It started with Evelyn Stanton. 3 days after I sent her the email, Olivia came home looking rattled. She was on the phone, pacing the kitchen, her voice tense. "No, I don't know how she found out." "Richard, calm down. We just need to figure out what she's going to do next. I sat at the table, sipping my coffee like nothing was wrong, watching her out of the corner of my eye. She's furious, obviously, Olivia hissed into the phone. I don't know if she's going to the board, but we need to get ahead of this. That's when I knew. Evelyn had seen the email. Olivia didn't even notice me as she stormed upstairs, still whispering frantically into her phone. I smirked. That was just the beginning. 2 days later, the second bomb dropped. I got home from work and found Olivia sitting at the kitchen table, staring blankly at her laptop. Her hands were gripping the sides of it like she was trying to keep herself from throwing it across the room. I leaned against the counter. Rough day? She let out a sharp, humorless laugh. You could say that. I played dumb. What happened? She rubbed her forehead. Someone sent the board a bunch of emails and photos, accusing me of having an affair with Richard. I took a slow sip of my drink. Weird. Who would do that? She exhaled sharply, her eyes darting around the room like she was searching for answers. I don't know. But it's bad. Really bad. The company is already in trouble and now they think I'm compromised. Richard is trying to handle it, but... She stopped. But what? I asked, keeping my tone light. She swallowed hard. They're talking about launching an internal investigation. If they think I've been using my relationship with Richard for personal gain, I could lose everything. My heart should have been pounding, but instead, I felt nothing but satisfaction. She was going to lose everything. And I wasn't done yet. I kept my face neutral as Olivia sat there, spiraling. She rubbed her temples like the weight of the world was pressing down on her, sighing dramatically. I can't believe this is happening, she muttered. I've worked too hard for this. I wanted to say, yeah, you worked real hard, all right. But I just nodded, playing the role of the supportive husband for a little longer. They can't just fire you over accusations, right? I asked, keeping my voice even. She shook her head. No, but if they investigate and find anything, I'm screwed. She was already sweating. She knew the truth was out there. I could see the gears in her head turning, trying to figure out what kind of damage control she needed to do. You think Richard will protect you? I asked casually, pretending to scroll through my phone. She hesitated. Just for a second. He said he would. But the way she said it? She didn't believe it. And she was right not to. Richard Stanton wasn't going to burn his whole career for her. A CEO caught in an affair with a subordinate? A company already struggling with bad press? The moment Evelyn got involved, Richard's survival instincts would kick in, and Olivia would be left in the dust. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She got up suddenly, grabbing her phone. I need to go for a drive. Clear my head. I nodded. Want me to come? She forced a smile. No, I'll be fine. Yeah, I bet. I watched from the window as she got into her car and sped off. I knew exactly where she was going. So I grabbed my phone, checked the tracker, and waited. 45 minutes later, she was at Richard's office. I took my time. Drove slow, parked a little ways down the street. I wasn't going in, I just wanted to see. And sure enough, there she was, standing outside the building talking to Richard. But this wasn't some secret lover's rendezvous. Richard looked pissed. Arms crossed, face tight. Olivia was talking fast, pleading, gesturing wildly. He barely reacted. Just stood there, shaking his head. Then, without another word, he turned and walked back inside, leaving Olivia standing there like an idiot. I knew that feeling. That moment when you realize the person you trusted just threw you away. I wonder if she felt even a fraction of what I felt that night I caught her. She stayed there for a few minutes, probably trying to collect herself. Then finally she got back in her car and drove home. When she walked through the front door, she looked like a ghost. What happened? I asked, forcing concern into my voice. She set her keys down and sat on the couch, staring at the floor. Richard? He says he needs to distance himself from me until this blows over. I sat next to her, keeping my expression neutral. That's rough. She let out a bitter laugh. Yeah, rough. I could see the panic in her eyes. She wasn't just worried about her job, she was alone. Richard had been her safety net, the man she thought she could count on, and now? Now she was sinking with no one to pull her back up. She had no idea that the worst was still coming. I stood up and stretched. Well, I'm sure it'll work out. You always land on your feet. She nodded, but there was no confidence in her eyes. I walked out of the room, barely containing my smirk. She had no idea that tomorrow she'd lose me too. The next morning, I woke up early. Olivia was still asleep, curled up on her side of the bed like she hadn't slept much. I stood there for a moment, looking at her, not with love, not with anger. Just nothing. I had loved this woman. I had given her everything. And she had thrown it away for a cheap affair with a man who didn't even care enough to stand by her when things got tough. Today was the day I walked away. But not before making sure she knew exactly what she had lost. While Olivia slept, I grabbed the duffel bag I had packed the night before. Most of my stuff was already out of the house, moved to my buddy Chris's place. I left behind the cheap things, the things I didn't care about. The things that would remind her of me every time she looked at them. Then I sat at the kitchen table and pulled out the envelope. Inside was everything: printouts of her messages, photos of her and Richard, copies of the hotel receipts. The morning after pill receipt. At the very top, I left a handwritten note. Since you love surprises, here's one for you. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. Don't call me. Don't text me. You're someone else's problem now. Jake. I placed the envelope on the kitchen counter, right where she'd see it first thing. Then I grabbed my keys and walked out the front door for the last time. Chris was waiting for me at the diner down the street. I slid into the booth and he pushed a cup of coffee toward me. You sure you don't want to be there when she finds it? He asked, smirking. I shook my head. Nah, I don't need to see it. I already know exactly how it's gonna go. She'd wake up, groggy and stressed. She'd come downstairs expecting me to be there like always. And then she'd see the envelope. At first, she'd probably think it was some kind of work document or bill. But then, as she flipped through the pages, her face would change. Her hands would start shaking. Her stomach would drop. And she'd realize she had lost everything. Her job, hanging by a thread. Richard, gone. Her marriage, over. And worst of all, she hadn't even seen it coming. Chris took a sip of his coffee. You think she'll try to contact you? I snorted. Of course she will. But she won't get through. I had blocked her number, deleted her from my social media. Even changed my email. As far as I was concerned, Olivia Covington didn't exist anymore. I had one. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that this wasn't the end. Because 5 years later, when I had finally moved on, when I had finally forgotten her, she came back. 5 years. That's how long it took for me to feel normal again. 5 years since I left Olivia in that house with nothing but a pile of evidence and a destroyed reputation. 5 years of rebuilding my life from the ground up. At first it was rough. Even after all the planning, all the satisfaction of watching her world crumble, there were nights where I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had done the right thing. If maybe, just maybe, I should have fought for our marriage instead of walking away. But then I'd remember the look on her face the night she came home from Richard's office. The way she panicked when she realized he wasn't going to protect her. And I'd remind myself that Olivia never fought for me. She fought for him. So I moved on. I took over a small auto repair shop with Chris, got my own place and started dating again. Nothing serious, but it felt good to be wanted, to be with women who didn't carry the weight of betrayal behind their smiles. Women who saw me as a man, not a stepping stone. For a long time, Olivia was nothing more than a bad memory. A ghost from a past life I had no interest in revisiting. Until the night she knocked on my door. It was late. Almost midnight. I was sitting on my couch, halfway through a beer, flipping through channels when I heard it, a slow, hesitant knock. At first, I thought it was my neighbor, some kid who had a bad habit of locking himself out of his apartment. But something about the knock felt off. Too cautious. Too familiar. I got up, walked to the door, and when I opened it, there she was. Olivia. I barely recognized her at first. Her hair, once perfectly styled, was now a little messy, like she had run her hands through it too many times. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes swollen. She looked exhausted. But the moment she saw me, her lips parted like she couldn't believe I was real. Like she had expected me to be gone forever. I didn't say a word. Just stood there, gripping the doorframe, waiting. She swallowed hard. Hi, Jake. That voice. I hadn't heard it in years, but it still hit me like a punch to the gut. I should have slammed the door in her face. Should have told her to get lost, that I had nothing to say to her. But instead I just asked, "What do you want?" She hesitated, like she didn't even know the answer herself. Then finally she exhaled shakily and whispered, "I need to talk to you." I laughed. Actually laughed. "Now you want to talk?" Her eyes dropped to the floor. "I know I'm the last person you want to see. I didn't know where else to go." I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "Not my problem." She winced. "Please, Jake. Just 5 minutes?" I should have said no. I should have walked away. But instead I stepped aside, letting her in. And just like that, Olivia Covington was back in my life. She walked in slowly, looking around like she was stepping into a stranger's home. Which, in a way, she was. Gone were the old pictures of us. The furniture we picked out together. The life we had built. Everything about this place was mine. She stood there for a second, hugging her arms like she was cold. You've changed the place. No kidding. I closed the door, keeping my distance. You want to tell me why you're here, or are we doing the whole awkward silence thing first? She took a deep breath, finally meeting my gaze. And that's when I saw it, fear. Not regret. Not sadness. Fear. I messed up, Jake, she whispered. I scoffed. Yeah, no kidding. You're about 5 years late with that realization. She shook her head. No, you don't understand. She stopped, biting her lip like she was trying to figure out how to say it. And for the first time I felt something other than anger. I felt curiosity. Because Olivia Covington wasn't just here for closure. She was here because something was very wrong. And whatever it was, it scared her to death. I watched Olivia like a hawk. Every nervous twitch, every flicker in her eyes. She wasn't just uncomfortable, she was scared. And I had no clue why. She took a shaky breath, rubbing her arms like she was freezing, even though my apartment wasn't cold. Jake, I don't even know where to start. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. How about with the truth? You owe me that much. Her mouth opened, then closed again. For a second I thought she might chicken out, turn around and walk right back out that door. But she didn't. Instead, she collapsed onto my couch, dropping her face into her hands. I ruined everything, she whispered. I ruined my life, I ruined your life, I ruined. She cut herself off, shaking her head. I thought I was making the right choices, but I was just so stupid. I stayed silent, waiting. I wasn't going to make this easy for her. She sighed and looked up at me. Richard Stanton screwed me over. I let out a bitter laugh. Took you 5 years to figure that out? She flinched. I know. But it's worse than you think. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, this should be good. She hesitated again, then finally said, Richard wasn't just cheating on his wife with me. I found out, after everything fell apart, that I was just one of the women he was sleeping with. I snorted. So what? You thought you were special? Thought he'd leave his wife for you? She didn't answer, which meant I was right. Jesus. She really had been that naive. She swallowed hard. After you left, everything spiraled. The board's investigation? It wasn't just about the affair. Richard had been shifting company funds, millions, into offshore accounts. And guess whose name was all over those financial reports? I narrowed my eyes. Yours? She nodded, looking down at her hands. I didn't even realize what I had signed off on. I was so caught up in him. And when everything blew up, he made sure all the blame landed on me. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. You lost your job, I said flatly. She gave a hollow laugh. That's an understatement. I lost everything. My career, my reputation. No one in the industry would touch me after that. I was a joke. I didn't respond. I just watched her squirm, soaking in every ounce of regret on her face. Then she whispered, and now I think someone's trying to kill me. That got my attention. My stomach tightened, but I kept my expression neutral. Excuse me? She swallowed hard, her fingers gripping the hem of her sweater. It started a few months ago. Little things at first. A car following me home. My apartment getting broken into, but nothing stolen. Then I started getting messages. What kind of messages? She pulled out her phone and handed it to me. I glanced down at the screen. You took everything from me. Now it's your turn. My blood ran cold. There were more texts. Some were vague threats. Others were direct. And the most recent one? See you soon. I exhaled slowly. You go to the police? She scoffed. Of course I did. They took a report, said they'd look into it. But nothing happened. I frowned. What about Richard? You have enemies? She let out a dry laugh. Richard is dead, Jake. That threw me off. What? She nodded, her face pale. About 6 months ago. It was ruled a suicide, gunshot wound to the head. But no one really believes that. Not after what he did to so many people. I leaned back, processing. Richard Stanton had ruined lives. He had stolen millions, manipulated people, destroyed Olivia's career. And now, someone wanted revenge. And for whatever reason, they thought she was responsible. She looked up at me, eyes desperate. I didn't know where else to go, Jake. Her voice broke slightly. I just needed to see you. Needed to know that someone out there doesn't completely hate me. I sighed, running a hand over my face. I should have told her to leave. I should have let her deal with this mess on her own. But instead, I found myself asking, do you have somewhere safe to stay? She blinked like she hadn't expected me to care at all. I don't know. I've been crashing at hotels, switching locations every few nights, but she shook her head. I feel like no matter where I go, someone's watching me. Something in my gut twisted. I still hated her. Still resented her for everything she had done. But that fear in her eyes? That wasn't fake. Someone really wanted her dead. And now, because she had come to me, I might be next. I stared at Olivia, my mind racing. A week ago, she was nothing but a bad memory, someone I had cut out of my life without hesitation. And now she was sitting in my living room claiming someone wanted her dead. I should have told her to get lost. Told her that whatever mess she was in, it wasn't my problem. But something about the fear in her eyes kept me from saying the words. Instead, I exhaled and asked, "Who do you think is after you?" She shook her head, gripping the edge of her sweater. "I don't know. But I've gone over every possibility, and it always comes back to one thing. Richard?" I frowned. "Richard's dead." "Yes, but the people he screwed over? They're not." I leaned forward, my arms resting on my knees. "You're saying you think this is revenge? Someone coming after you because they can't get to Richard?" She nodded slowly. "I was his right hand. The media dragged my name through the mud just as much as his. And when he died, people didn't just move on. They wanted someone to pay." I thought about that for a second. Richard Stanton hadn't just been some corporate executive. He was a man who had lied, stolen, and manipulated his way to the top. When the truth came out, dozens of investors, employees, and business partners had been left in financial ruin. If someone out there had lost everything because of Richard, it made sense they'd be looking for payback. I just didn't know why Olivia was the target. "You weren't the mastermind behind it," I pointed out. "You were just a fool," she finished bitterly. "A naive idiot who thought she was important to him." She shook her head, letting out a humorless laugh. "I didn't even know what he was doing until it was too late. But to everyone else? I was part of it. And now Richard's dead and I'm the only one left to blame. Something about that didn't sit right with me." "So why now?" I asked. "If people have hated you for years, why is someone coming after you now?" She hesitated. Just for a second. And I caught it. "What aren't you telling me, Olivia?" She looked away. "It's complicated." I clenched my jaw. "Try me." She swallowed hard, her fingers tightening into fists. I might have done something stupid." I leaned back. "Of course you did." She exhaled sharply, like she had expected me to say that. "After Richard's death, I was barely getting by. No one would hire me, my reputation was shot. Then, about 2 months ago, I got an offer. Someone wanted to pay me for information about Richard's offshore accounts." I felt my stomach tighten. "And you gave it to them?" She didn't answer right away. But her silence was enough. "For how much?" I asked, my voice flat. She looked down. "Enough to survive." I let out a bitter laugh. "So you sold information about a corrupt billionaire's hidden money to God knows who, and now you're surprised someone's after you?" She flinched. "I didn't think it would come back to me." "That's your problem, Olivia," I snapped. "You never think about consequences until they're staring you in the face." She looked up at me, and for the first time, there was something other than fear in her expression. "You think I don't know that?" she whispered. "You think I don't wake up every day wishing I could go back and change everything?" I didn't answer. Because honestly, I didn't care. I had spent too many nights wondering why she did what she did. Wondering if she had any regrets. If she had ever, even for a second, missed me. And now I had my answer. She did. But it didn't change a damn thing. The room went silent. Finally, I sighed and ran a hand down my face. "What do you want from me, Olivia?" She hesitated. "I don't know, Bull." She swallowed. I didn't know where else to go." That wasn't an answer. But it also wasn't a lie. I exhaled slowly, staring at her. 5 years ago, I had left her in the wreckage of her own mistakes. I had walked away and never looked back. And now here she was. Not because she wanted to make amends. Not because she missed me. But because she was desperate. I shook my head. "You can't stay here." She tensed. "Jake. I'm not your savior," I cut her off. "Not anymore. You made your bed, Olivia. You're gonna have to lie in it." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. She just nodded like she had expected this. Slowly, she stood up, wrapping her arms around herself. "I understand." "Good." I walked to the door, opening it. "Good luck." She stepped past me, pausing for just a second on the threshold. And then, just as she started to leave, she whispered, "I never stopped loving you, Jake." Then she walked out into the night. I shut the door behind her. Locked it. Then sat back down, rubbing my temples. This was over. Or at least it should have been. But when I woke up the next morning, there was a note slipped under my door. I know she was here. She won't get away this time. Neither will you. I stared at the note, my pulse pounding. The handwriting was jagged, rushed, like whoever wrote it was barely holding it together. I stepped back, scanning the hallway through the peephole. Empty. No footsteps. No voices. Just silence. Gripping the note, I locked the door, double-locked it. Then I grabbed my phone and called Olivia. No answer. I tried again. Straight to voicemail. I cursed under my breath. She had just left. Whoever left this note had to be watching. I exhaled, forcing myself to think. I should have never let her in. Now, whoever was after her knew she had come to me. And that meant I had just been pulled into whatever nightmare she was running from. I grabbed my keys and headed outside, scanning the parking lot. No sign of Olivia. No sign of anyone. But someone had been here. Someone new. I jumped in my truck and drove, checking my mirrors every few seconds. If I was being followed, I couldn't see them. But that didn't mean they weren't there. I tried Olivia again. Still nothing. A bad feeling settled in my gut. I didn't owe her anything, not after what she did. But if whoever was after her had decided I was a target too, then I needed answers. Fast. And the only person who had them was Olivia. I drove around the city, checking every place I thought Olivia might go, hotels, parking garages, even a couple of bars she used to like. Nothing. She had vanished. I pulled into a gas station, gripping the wheel. Think Jake. Whoever was after her had found my place fast. That meant they were tracking her somehow. Phone. Credit cards? If she was smart, she ditched them. But Olivia had never been great at covering her tracks. Then it hit me, her car. She'd been driving a rental since she was hopping from hotel to hotel. If they were tracking her, they'd be watching that. I pulled out my phone and searched for nearby rental lots. There was only one close by. I took a deep breath, started the engine and headed straight for it. If Olivia was there, I'd find her. Someone else was there first? Then I wasn't just looking for answers. I was walking into a fight. I pulled into the rental lot, my heart pounding. The place was nearly empty, just a few cars parked under the flickering lights. And then I saw it. Olivia's rental. She was inside, hunched over the steering wheel like she was trying to make herself invisible. I parked a few spaces away, stepped out and approached carefully. I tapped on the window and she jumped, eyes wide with panic. When she realized it was me, she exhaled sharply and unlocked the door. I slid into the passenger seat. Why the hell aren't you answering your phone? She shook her head. I had to turn it off. I think they're tracking me. I pulled out the note from under my door and handed it to her. They already know where you've been. Her face paled as she read it. Oh God. I leaned in. Olivia, you need to tell me everything. No more half-truths. No more leaving things out. Who did you sell that information to? She hesitated. Olivia. She swallowed hard. I don't know their real names. Just a contact. Someone calling themselves Vance? I frowned. And now they're after you? She nodded. I think they wanted more. More than I had. And when I couldn't give it to them, her voice trailed off. They decided you weren't useful anymore. She looked at me, eyes full of regret. I didn't mean to drag you into this, Jake. Too late for that. I sighed, rubbing my face. We need to get out of here. Find somewhere safe. But before I could say another word, headlights flooded the car. A black SUV pulled into the lot, slow and deliberate. Someone was inside. Watching us. Olivia's breath hitched. Jake. I clenched my jaw. Stay quiet. The SUV idled for a second. Then the driver's side door opened. A man stepped out. Tall. Broad shoulders. Dressed in black. And even from here I could see it. A gun tucked under his jacket. This wasn't a warning anymore. This was a message. And we were out of time.